Right now, on a windswept dune or a cold roadside embankment somewhere in the northern half of the world, it's clinging to ground almost nothing else will touch. Vicious thorns, narrow silver-green leaves, and clusters of berries in an orange so bright they look lit from the inside. Most people who walk past have no idea they're food. Fewer still know what's inside them. Because that orange berry is the richest plant source on Earth of a rare fatty acid called Omega-7, palmitoleic acid, an oil so close to the natural oil in your own skin that your body treats it almost like its own. And there's a story that clings to this shrub tighter than the thorns, that Soviet cosmonauts carried it into orbit against cosmic radiation, that its oil was smeared on the burns of the men sent into Chernobyl. I'll be straight with you from the very start. One of those claims I could stand behind, and one of them I couldn't. And untangling which was which turned out to be the whole point of this video. Keep the berry in mind, because the reason you've never heard of it isn't a ban. It's something quieter, and in a way, more effective than any ban ever could be. Let's be clear about what this is not. This is not a rare jungle fruit from some untouched valley. It's a hardy shrub, planted deliberately across Europe, Asia, and North America, on sand dunes, on eroding slopes, along cold highway verges, because it grips dead soil and simply refuses to die. There are entire hillsides of it. It has been broadcast from aircraft across the deserts of China. It is not rare, and it is not new. And yet in the West it shows up almost nowhere as food. It arrives instead as a luxury, a $50 face oil, a small bottle of Omega-7 capsules with a premium price on the label. Same berry. The plant is free, and the extract is expensive, and the enormous gap between those two prices is where this entire story lives. There's no villain with a patent here. No agency that banned it, no scandal, no smear. What buried this plant in the Western mind was something far duller and far more powerful. A line on a map and a language barrier. And I'm going to show you, step by step, exactly how a plant, a superpower kept in its own medicine cabinet, became a plant you've never heard of. This is the story of sea buckthorn. Welcome to Landfield's lab. Follow it back, and the first thread is almost charming. The plant's scientific name is hippophae, from the ancient Greek words for shining horse. The story handed down is that the Greeks turned horses loose into thickets of this shrub, and the animals came back heavier, calmer, with coats that gleamed. In some tellings, it was fed to war horses. In others, it's tied to the legend of Pegasus himself. Whether every detail is literal or not, the name has held for over 2,000 years. The plant that makes the horse shine. But hold on to that, because the deeper root of this plant's medicine isn't Greek at all. It's Himalayan, and it's far older and far more serious than a story about glossy horses. More than 1,000 years ago, sea buckthorn was already a cornerstone of Tibetan, Mongolian, and Central Asian medicine. There are records of its medicinal use going back to at least the 8th century. And in one of the foundational texts of Tibetan medicine, a classic known as the Four Tantras, sea buckthorn doesn't get a passing mention. By traditional accounts, it appears in dozens of separate preparations, by some counts as many as 84 different remedies drawn from its roots, stems, leaves, flowers, and fruit. Sit with that number for a second, because it reframes everything. This was not a folk curiosity. This was a documented central medicine in an entire tradition, written down while most of Europe was still centuries away from noticing the plant existed. And that gap, a plant used for over 1,000 years in one half of the world, and unknown in the other, is the exact paradox this whole video is trying to explain. Now jump forward to the 20th century, because this is where sea buckthorn stops being ancient history and becomes a state project. In the 1930s, in the Altai region of Siberia, a Soviet horticulturist named Mikhail Lisavenko began collecting and sowing the best wild forms of sea buckthorn he could find. That work grew into a decades-long breeding program at what became the Lisavenko Research Institute of Siberian Horticulture in the city of Barnaul. This is where the wild thorny shrub was genuinely domesticated. Over the following decades, Soviet breeders released cultivar after cultivar, until Russia had something on the order of 70 approved sea buckthorn varieties. And this wasn't just gardening. Soviet scientists took the plant apart in the laboratory and reported something startling. The fruit of sea buckthorn contained more than 190 distinct bioactive compounds. The oil alone carried over 100. Fat-soluble vitamins, dozens of fatty acids, flavonoids, carotenoids, a chemical toolkit unusually large for a single berry. Here's the part that matters most. On the strength of that research, sea buckthorn oil became an officially recognized medicine, approved for clinical use in Soviet hospitals, used on burns, on bed sores, on damaged skin and mucous membranes. This was no longer folklore. It was sitting in the state's own pharmacy with an official registration number. And that, a real state-backed burn and skin medicine, is exactly the soil in which the cosmonaut and Chernobyl legends took root. I'll come back to those with the receipts I could and couldn't find. First, so you'd actually recognize this thing if you saw it. Sea buckthorn is a tough, thorny shrub, usually shoulder to rooftop height, with slim silver-green leaves that look almost like a willow's. The branches are armed with long, hard thorns, real ones, the kind that puncture. And in late summer and autumn, the berries arrive in dense clusters of round, brilliant orange, packed so tightly they seem to shrink-wrap the stem. There's one detail about how it grows that becomes important later, so file it away now. Sea buckthorn is dioecious. That means there are separate male and female plants, and only the females bear fruit. You cannot just plant one and get berries. You need both, in the right ratio, or you get nothing but thorns. It's also a pioneer. Its roots carry nitrogen-fixing nodules, meaning it actually feeds the poor soil it grows in, which is precisely why governments have planted it by the million to hold back erosion. It shrugs off drought, salt, and cold down to 40 below, and it grows at altitudes where most fruit simply gives up. The berries themselves are intensely tart, citrusy, almost sharp enough to hurt raw, and by weight they carry several times more vitamin C than an orange. That vivid orange color is pure carotenoid, the same family of pigments your body uses to make vitamin A. Remember those thorns, though, because they come back at the end. Now, does the medicine actually hold up outside Soviet law? I went in skeptical, and I'll give it to you weakest to strongest, so you can judge for yourself. Start with the mechanism, which is the weakest kind of evidence, but also the most elegant. That Omega-7, palmite oleic acid, is a natural building block of human skin oil. Your own sebum contains it. So a plant oil unusually rich in it isn't a random match. In laboratory studies on cultured human skin cells, sea buckthorn oil has reduced the damage caused by ultraviolet light by roughly a quarter. Promising, but a cell in a dish is not a person, and I won't pretend it is. Stronger, real patients, real bodies. In a 1999 study, people with atopic dermatitis, eczema, took sea buckthorn oil daily for 4 months, and their symptoms measurably eased. It's a small study, but it's a genuine effect in living human beings. And in controlled animal work, sea buckthorn seed oil has been shown to speed the healing of burn wounds in rats. Strongest, and the one that actually moved me, a 2014 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial published in the journal Maturitas, the tightest study design medicine has. 116 postmenopausal women took 3 grams of sea buckthorn oil a day, or an identical-looking placebo, for 3 months. Neither the women nor the researchers knew who got which, and at the end, the sea buckthorn group showed a measurable improvement in the integrity of delicate, fragile mucosal tissue that the placebo group simply did not. Notice what that trial is actually demonstrating. The oil helping thin, fragile tissue rebuild itself. Hold that result in your mind against the burn and radiation stories. Real tissue, healing better, because now we finally get to them. Here is what actually happened to sea buckthorn, and it is not a story about suppression. It's a story about obscurity, which is quieter and in the end more complete. Through the middle of the 20th century, nearly all the serious science on this plant was Soviet, and then Chinese. The Russians bred it and wrote its oil into their pharmacopoeia. China went even further. In 1977, sea buckthorn was formally listed in the Chinese Pharmacopoeia. That same year, China established a vast plantation by broadcasting seed from aircraft, sowing an entire landscape from the sky across the eroding Los Plateau. Chinese institutes ran years of experiments and developed more than 10 distinct medicines in every form imaginable. So picture the situation by the late 20th century. In the East, this is a pharmacopoeia plant, a state crop, a subject of thousands of research papers. And in the West, very close to nothing. Why? Because nearly all of that work was published in Russian and in Chinese on the far side of the Cold War. It was never translated. It was never folded into Western medical literature. When Western researchers eventually looked up, they didn't find a body of evidence. They hit a language wall. So the plant wasn't banned. It was orphaned. It arrived instead as an exotic cosmetic. It arrived as an oil to bottle and sell, with its entire scientific backstory left sitting, untranslated, on the other side of a closed border. Which brings me back to the cosmonauts. You will read, absolutely everywhere, that Soviet cosmonauts used sea buckthorn cream to protect against cosmic radiation, and that the victims of Chernobyl were treated with its oil. I genuinely wanted to confirm it. So I went looking. And here is the truth. Those specific claims are repeated endlessly, but I could not trace either of them back to a solid, primary, verifiable source. They may well be true. We know it was an approved Soviet medicine, but plausible and repeated 1,000 times online are not the same thing as documented. I am not going to hand you a legend dressed up as a fact just because it makes a better thumbnail, because this admission reveals the real payoff. The reason I can't verify the space story is why the plant is obscure here. The documentation, if it exists, sits in a Soviet archive, in Russian, that the West never opened. And that cuts both ways. The lazy Western dismissal, there's no real evidence, isn't honest either. There is a mountain of evidence. It's just written in the wrong language, untranslated and undertested by our standards. Not disproven, not debunked, just ignored. A plant stranded on the wrong side of a border. So why then is it a $50 face oil instead of something ordinary on your kitchen shelf? Part of the answer is those thorns, and that male and female problem I told you to remember. Sea buckthorn is brutal to harvest. The branches bristle with hard spikes, and the ripe berries are so soft they burst at the lightest squeeze. You can't just strip them off by hand. The traditional method is almost violent. You cut whole fruiting branches off the plant, freeze them at 30 or 40 below, and then knock the frozen berries loose. You are pruning the plant to harvest it. Add in the fact that only the female plants fruit, and that mechanical harvesting is still a stubborn, unsolved breeding problem, and you have a crop that is genuinely difficult and expensive to bring in at volume. And on top of all that, you cannot patent a shrub. The money was never in the plant itself, because anyone can grow it. The money is in processing the berry into oil and wrapping a luxury label around it. So that is exactly where all the marketing points. The extract, not the berry. Meanwhile, the plant itself grows semi-wild and planted right across the cold parts of the world, almost entirely unrecognized as food. So, if you did want to use it, the traditional forms are simple. The tart berries cooked down into juice, syrup or jam, or the oil taken in small amounts. It's honestly easier to take as a medicine than to enjoy as a fruit. But one genuine caution, and please don't skip it. Sea buckthorn can affect how your blood clots, and it may nudge your blood pressure downward. If you take blood thinners or blood pressure medication, talk to your doctor. Start small regardless. It's rich and acidic. And if you forage it yourself, take it only from clean, unsprayed ground, well back from traffic, and respect those thorns. I'm not telling you to go plant a wall of it. I'm telling you that a plant the East has used for over 1,000 years sat completely unread on our side of a border for 50 years. And it is still out there right now. It is orange and thorned and ignored. If you want the next forgotten plant we pull out of the vault, subscribe, because some of them were never buried at all. They were just never translated.